The following is an encore presentation from Flatoberfest 2022. Sean Griffin.
All right, everyone, we do have our technical stuff set up now, so we're about ready to keep going with the presentations. And up next, we have Sean Griffin from the channel Kingdom in Context, with his presentation on investigating Babylon. And we will be having a small break in the middle of Sean's presentation, because it is a little long, just to let you know. And if you're ready to begin, Sean, go ahead.
Thank you, Karen. Can everyone hear me well? Big shout out to Karen. Thank you so much for inviting me to Flatoberfest 2022. I was here just a couple years ago as a spectator and got to meet a bunch of awesome people. And many of these awesome presenters that are also talking this year as well had a huge hand in me coming to the conclusions that I'm going to be presenting here today. And I want to lovingly warn everyone that some of these conclusions are unique. So we're going to be doing this in two parts. And I think it's funny because my wife always tells me I'm long-winded. But I've got a plan, I've got a stopwatch. We're gonna do 1 hour, take a break and do the second hour. And hopefully by the break, you're going to not wanna look away, because we've got some fun stuff to talk about ancient history, about how it correlates with our modern times and the deceptions that we're living within, and then about the future. So this is my Investigating Babylon series that I did on my channel, Kingdom in Context, on YouTube. And we did a 21-part series over the course of about 12 or 13 months. So there is over 30 hours worth of content in my series, and I'm trying to summarize it into 2 hours today. But after 7 o'clock tonight, I'm gonna have a USB drive with this presentation on all 30 plus hours on that USB drive at the table back there, if you guys are interested, if you like what I have to say. So let's get started. Investigating Babylon was a unique, I did not expect to be investigating Babylon because I thought, oh, everybody always talks about Mystery Babylon in churches and there's 1,001 opinions, and why would I want to, but when I came into the understanding of where we live, that we're not on a randomless, purposeless ball in space, and that we actually have a creator who put us in a very specific and enclosed creation environment that is catered to us. And I read in the scriptures how the earth was made for man, and this is the place where we, according to the Christian faith, inherit eternal life and live forever. And the Father and the Son actually brings their kingdom, their house, down to where we are. So then I thought, okay, that was a mind blower for me. As I grew up, my father was a pastor, and I grew up in church for the most part. But then I started to dig into the bad guys in the Bible. It mentions a lot of bad behavior in the Bible of people, nations, kings, and other spiritual forces that perpetrate destruction and chaos and disorder onto society to get people away from the Creator. And so I started trying to dig into that a little bit, and that's what led me to the Investigating Babylon series. And so the audacious claim that I'm going to make today is that not only are we going to learn about some fun, interesting, cool stuff about history and how it relates to today, how we're still living in Bible times, whether we like that terminology or not, we're also going to figure out where the Satan character is actually at. No one ever asked this question in church. Just because, for the same reason they don't really know where God's at when it comes to a biblical perspective. They don't understand. They never ask, well, if we live in an enclosed creation, because they're not taught that, they don't realize the Creator's literally right above them. So if that's real, and that's a reality that we now understand with a greater perspective, where's the bad guy? What's his history? What's his origin story? And where is he actually? The Bible tells us. So I want to share that with you today. Let's get started. This is Investigating Babylon. We're going to be looking at the past, the present, and the future of Babylon. All right. So, like I said, we did a 21-part series. The first 7 parts of this series, we covered the past, everything from the origins of Babylon up to the king, the first king of ancient Babylon. In the middle, we talked about relics of that ancient kingdom we still see around the earth today. This was parts 8 through 14, and also some of the secret societies and their machinations of deception that are perpetrated in multiple countries today. We talked about that through the middle part of the series. In the future part, we discussed prophecies of eschatology, how these things coalesce to the end of the story as the Bible portrays it to be a situation where the Creator and His Son actually come down to where we live and stop the cap. They stop the violence. They stop the nonsense from these people that continually perpetrate lies to deceive us. And it's a beautiful story, guys. So real quick, the ancient story of Babylon in the plain of Shinar, a couple hundred years after the story of the flood of Noah. Man's propagating again through the 3 sons of Noah. They find the plain of Shinar. It's a wonderful flat area that they can build. They start building a city and a tower. I always try to reference that people always hear about the Tower of Babylon, or the Tower of Babel. They never think about the other construction that was going on there. There was a lot more happening than just the tower. The tower was the signifier of its authority and its power as they drew all the people groups that were alive at that time to that place, to that construction project. The tower, as the passages in Jubilees and Genesis tell us, they wanted to reach the firmament. This is what is called the heaven. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 6 through 8, the Creator, after he makes the solid arched structure called the firmament, he gave it a name, and he called it the heaven. And the Bible describes there's multiple layers of firmament where he and the angels live above us. But the first layer that encloses us was the layer of the heaven that the men at the Tower of Babel tried to build an actual building to reach it because they wanted to remove God's authority over them and govern themselves. So many theologians and historians, they try to figure out, well, what did the Tower of Babel look like? How really big was it? What was the ancient world of Babylon like? We have supposedly one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world are the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Even though no one can really attest to what exactly that was. Many people think it was just really gardens at a really tall level of the building. Just as a quick comparison to the modern day, the Empire State Building, 1,450 feet tall. That took them about a year to build in the early 20th century. Modern day building, the Tokyo Skytree, 2,080 feet tall, took them 4 years to build. The Dubai Creek Tower took them 5 years to build. That's 4,400 feet tall. This is over in Dubai. The Burj Khalifa, many people have recognized this one, 5 years to build, 2,700 feet. This is the Burj Khalifa around the other buildings in Dubai. They built Dubai in 20 years, approximately, the way it looks today. A modern first world nation, or first world city, built in the sands of the desert, and they built an amazing megaplex in that short amount of time. This is a side view, profile view of some of the skyscrapers in Dubai. I want you guys to take note of that unique little building with the ball on top. We're going to talk about that towards the end. This is the Burj Khalifa towering over the rest of the buildings. But guess what, guys? Supposedly, according to Scripture, the Burj Khalifa dwarfs in comparison to the Tower of Babel. So, from some ancient Midrash writings from the Hebrew scholars, used to be called rabbis, over 2,000 years ago, they talked about how the argument for the people that built the Tower of Babel was that they were mad that God destroyed the people in the flood, and they didn't want that to happen again, so that's why they wanted to cast off the authority of heaven above them and govern themselves. So if we believe, for the sake of today's presentation, we're going to believe that the Bible is true and that the story of Noah in the flood is accurate, and that means he got off the boat with 3 sons, whom they each had a wife, and they started having babies, grandbabies, great-grandbabies. And guess what they're talking about at night? Why is this place a big muddy slop? Why are all these trees so young? Why is all this land scarred? Why are there still massive places that are flooded that we can see still drying out over the last 5 years? And of course, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth would tell the children, this is what happened. This is what we just went through. And this is why. This was the story of the world before we went through the flood. And this is why the Creator saved us out of that ridiculously horrific environment where mankind was almost extinct because massive giants, rebellious angels, perpetrating a full-on war against mankind to extinguish mankind from the earth. So they're telling their children this story, but as we all know, if anyone's ever had a child, you know that they don't believe everything you say. Doesn't matter how much life experience you have. Doesn't matter how much you prove it to them in real practical example. One of the children, many of the children of Noah, did not believe the story, and they developed an offense. It was the first woke crew of flake emotions, where they suddenly had an imaginary offense, even though none of their life was truly affected, because now they're growing up in a new world where they get to make anything they want. And they have these incredibly wise older forefathers before them that have amazing wisdom. And if we believe the story of the Bible, people lived a lot longer back then. And there's a reason for that, but that's not part of this presentation. So you've got someone 400 or 500 years old showing you everything you know in life, explaining things to you in great detail, teaching you not only medicines, which the book of Jubilees explains, there was an entire book of medicines that Noah had to cure all ailments, but also how to grow, how to farm, how to make stuff, tools, building materials, architecture, and engineering. It's a massive work of architecture to build a boat the size of the one described in the scriptures. Noah knew how to do that. This is not a simple feat. These are smart dudes. Don't believe the evolutionary heliocentric narrative that tries to tell you that mankind was crawling out of caves and didn't have a known language. They were extremely smart. And as a result, some of their offspring decided, we don't like that story, but yet they believed part of the story enough to believe they were in an enclosed environment, and above the firmament above them was the Creator. So they purposed in their heart, as I see on screen, they thought God has no right to choose the upper world for themselves. They wanted to live up there. They wanted to go to space, go colonize Mars with some helicopters and 1% atmosphere. No, they didn't have that narrative back then. They wanted to go to another layer of what they were taught. They lived in a big house that was 7 layers tall, and they were on the bottom layer, the first floor. And they weren't happy with that. They wanted to go to a layer above, take out that authority structure, and live up there. By the way, as you see at the bottom of the screen, this is also in the generation of Abraham. So I want you guys to imagine this mindset. Abraham's in the backdrop. The famous Abraham. Abraham's father was second in line to the first king of Babylon. He was the chief idol maker and the actual general of the army. Abraham's father was one of the lead proponents of deception in ancient Babylon. And the Creator pulled Abraham out of that and taught him truth, just as so many of us have been pulled out of massive deceptions, which is why we're sitting in this crowd today. Jubilees 10, they all spoke with one language. The Creator decided he wanted to change their languages so they can no longer collectively with one purpose rebel in the same way, because there's a lot of destruction that happened when they started rebelling. There's specific guys. We're going to go fast after this. I just kind of gave a setup, but we're now going to kind of start moving fast for the first hour. And I'm trying to get as much of this completed as possible so that at the end of the second hour, I can actually leave 10 or 15 minutes to take some questions, okay? Our Faxad, this is in the Greek Septuagint. Our Faxad, one of the guys we see in Genesis chapter 10, one of the sons of Shem, descendants of Noah, had a child named Canaan. After the flood, he found some of the teachings of the rebellious angels from before the flood carved in some rocks, and he started abiding by those teachings. And specifically, it was about how the sun, moon, and stars worked and the omens associated with them. Deuteronomy 4:19 would call this the occult. The origins of the occult came from before the flood. So this is a fascinating concept. And it's the teachings of what's called the Watchers. Different classes of angels are described in the Bible. They're all considered servants that the Creator made to send to earth, specifically down here where we live, to minister to us, to help us, to do whatever's needed, whatever mission they're sent on. Different classes are called different things. Some of the watchers, 200 in total, according to the book of Enoch and Jubilees, ancient Israeli scripture, they were actually sent to the earth and they abandoned their actual good mission and started doing a bad thing. They took wives. They had these unspiritual, unclean babies as a result of them. They had what's called the Nephilim. Those became the giants that oppressed mankind, started cannibalism, and started the occult. They started receiving worship to those unclean spirits, those giant Nephilim, and forcing and oppressing mankind in a variety of ways. This is the origin stories of the Titans, as well as the chimeras of ancient Greece. This is all before the flood. These practices, this guy named Canaan is reading about them on a rock after the flood, and he picks them back up again. And what's hilarious at the end of this passage in verse 4, it says that he didn't want to tell Noah because he knew Noah would be mad. You don't say. We just went through this flood. We just in a boat for a year with a bunch of stinky animals, a bunch of poo. We had to shovel every day. And you're going to start doing the same stuff that led us here again. So there was always some rebellious people, right? Canaan is in the same generation of a guy named Nimrod, as we see in the Greek, also called Nimrod, famous historical character. This is the first king of Babylon. Arphaxad fathered Canaan, Canaan fathered Selah, Selah fathered Eber. Eber is where you get the word Hebrew down the line. So this is a comparison of where we see in the New Testament Greek well into the Old Testament Greek from the Septuagint. You have this gentleman Canaan. He's actually been removed from the Masorite text, which is what a lot of the KJV Bibles are based off of. That's a deeper cut for people that know the history of the Bible. But he is actually mentioned in Genesis 10. This is Cush fathered Nimrod. And then as we go through the different clans that are associated with him, we even get the Caphthorim, which is where the origin story from ancient Greece originated from the giants, as well as the Philistines. If anyone's been to Sunday school, you probably heard that word before, Philistines. What God wanted to do through Noah and his sons was command them to go out and repopulate the earth. But they thought that they would be bad if they did that because then it would make them weaker. So I'm going to brush through some of this. They thought that they had more prosperity by collectively getting together. They didn't want to be spread out. They thought they had power in numbers. So ultimately, they're disobeying Noah's instruction and they're disobeying the Creator's instruction. They just want to do their own thing. And it was Nimrod, according to historians, that excited the people to view it as an act of courage to stand up against the Creator. They thought it was cowardice to do what the Creator wanted, and he taught people that it was courage to go against the Creator's instructions. And it says he gradually changed their government to tyranny. How appropriate, because he's the first king of Babylon. Socialism and communism, as I'll explain here in about an hour, is based off of Babylonian government theology. And of course, people followed after Nimrod. It's not too hard when he promises you illicit sex and drugs and do whatever you want. That's literally the practices of the occult and all the shrines and temples to the gods that they worshipped. So, as a part of a buffer, if I could put it like this, as a part of a strategic response by the Creator, as he came and he put diverse languages into the people so they could no longer communicate easily. But now starts the grand story of all the nations, the different cultures that speak different languages. They all walk away from the same plane of Shinar with the same memories of what happened, but now they can't communicate with each other. They're still worshiping the same pantheon of gods, but now they have different languages, so they call them by different names. And this is where it gets mysterious. It's not really mysterious, guys. It's just This is what historians will allow you to believe. They're baffled, like, we can't figure out the etymology of languages suddenly exploded 4,000 years ago. We can't figure out all these different writings and diverse artifacts and relics that have all these different languages. And it seems like before that there was nothing, but about 4,000 years ago, it suddenly exploded with all these different languages. I'm like, yeah, have you read the Bible? Take note of this right here. The priests of Jupiter were there. The priests of Jupiter also left the area of the Tower of Babel and went off to their own lands, I would say back to Greece, as descendants of Japheth. Jupiter's the sky god. Now we're going to start getting into some of what they believed and why. Because they didn't believe that this was just, like, they made idols. They carved with wood, stone, and metals. They made a representation of a person. But they believed that person was real and have accounts of interacting with that person. They never thought that this was a controlling mechanism just to make something up as an authority figure and then make a little carving out of it and then have people worship it. They claim to have interacted with these people they made images out of. So that, one of them is called Jupiter. Ancient Roman sky god, to the Greeks, he's called Zeus. There were priests of Zeus or Jupiter at the Tower of Babel, meaning they were already worshiping these false gods, these people, these characters, these individuals, when they showed up at the tower. We go to ancient India. Remember, Tower of Babel, they all disperse. Many historians believe it was approximately 70 different languages that were created. They all go to different lands. Many of them go to where it's called India today. They have an incredibly elaborate pantheon of gods in Hinduism that reach back to the Vedic texts of 4,000 years ago. This, as you see on screen, is one of them called Indra. Notice what he has in his hand here. Is Daniel in the audience? Daniel, could you do me a quick favor and go to that box behind my table and get the vajra, the metal vajra, out of the table and bring it up here? I forgot my prop. I had an illustration prop. So this is a vajra. To the ancient Indians, the quote-unquote gods, the ruling class, they had a vajra, which was a device that could destroy the enemy in the form of attacking flying machines. It also had the ability to cause rain. And it was a symbol of fertility. The vajra itself is a thunder of 1,000 blades, which is what they generically refer to as lightning, forged from iron or gold mixed with bronze usually. The point of this, guys, was it was like a scepter of authority in their hand, but not just for the sake of symbolism. They claimed it actually was a functioning device. It controlled drones, attacking flying machines, as well as produce lightning. You guys remember seeing the pictures? People with different types of vajras in their hand from ancient cultures. The Hindus love the vajra. Vishnu, Shiva, they all got a vajra. Ancient Greek coin, he's also got one. This is Zeus on a Greek coin. He's got one. These are relics of vajras that have been found over the years, many of them in Nepal, India, different types. Some of them are small, some of them are massive. There's Zeus, another depiction from ancient Greece. Zeus attacking with the vajra. Different pictures of different vajras. Take a moment, look at the side of this picture. You can see the gentleman standing next to this for scale. Remember, we talked about giants in the ancient world, both before and after the flood. Just like the Bible talks about, so did all the ancient cultures talk about. Here's a vajra that they found in Nepal. The vajra was also in ancient Egypt. This is going to come up a little bit later towards the end of the broadcast, this picture again, because the staff of the authority figures of Egypt, the gods of Egypt, as well as the Ankh, as well as the Djed, they all go together, and we'll explain that here in a minute. Ancient Ptah, one of the rulers of ancient Egypt, holding a form of a vajra. I'll explain later. I'm just teasing some things. Poseidon, also known as Hades. I'm going to explain the origin of him and what he's about. Here's a depiction of Ra on his boat, fighting the serpent, using his own scepter, his own staff. Here's again Zeus with the smaller vajra. And Zeus, of course, always has the bird with him. We'll explain about that more as well. This is just a modern day light show. People are using Tesla rods to produce an electrical discharge on the outer ends. But boy, it sure looks a lot like a vajra. One of Tesla's actual machines. Another plasma discharge from a Tesla-like little machine, home experiment stuff. So, the ancient world was famous. Now, the big question is it legit? Can they, whatever this device was that they keep showboating in all these ancient hieroglyphs, and they talk about in their actual Vedic texts, which ancient India revered as their Bible. Can it do what it actually says? Can it control attacking flying machines? What are we talking about? Attacking flying machines in ancient India? 4,000 years ago? It can cause rain? That's weather manipulation. They had a little heart machine in their hand? Like, what is this? I'm putting forward today, guys, it's not only was very real, but it's literally why we see these same types of machinations, which are means of deception, as well as we see the same types of technology being reintroduced to the world today in different ways. Take quick note of this hieroglyph. This is a djed, also ran off a form of power. Many would think it's electricity. It's from ancient Egypt. We're going to talk about this as we go into the first beast of Revelation. Someone earlier was asking Mark Sargent who they thought the Antichrist was. It's not Mark's forte as far as his line of study, but it is mine. So I'm going to give you not only his name, his location, his origin, and who he is in the future, how we're going to tell who he is without a doubt. There'll be no ambiguity. And who he shows up with and what happens to him. Ancient Egypt, more devices that people feel like had electricity to do with them, with the famous tulip thing. As you can see, it's got a djed below it. A museum that tried to recreate it. It's all over their architecture. It's always around the gods and the kings of Egypt. It's power. Sometimes they're personified as these pillars of djed, which the Egyptian Book of the Dead claims had the power to give this mortal flesh immortality. I don't know what that means, but that's what their claims are. We're also going to be looking at the spheres everywhere. There's always spheres involved in the ancient cultures. Here's Anubis with a sphere in his hand. They love their balls. They do. Children with balls. They love them. Just like when you tell not only, soccer balls and footballs and things like that, but just like, if you're a parent, if you had a child that's 2 years old, that's a boy, you have to tell him to stop touching himself. You know what I mean? You'd be like, dude, stop touching yourself. Like but put your hands up here now. It's okay. The spheres are everywhere. They put them in depictions, and many times they're wrapped in the serpent. The serpent was one of the deities of ancient Egypt, as well as the Akkadians, the Sumerians, the Indians, the Greeks. The oracle at Delphi, many of you may have already heard about this, used to be a cult to the serpent god until Apollo took it over. Zeus with the vajra in his hand. This is a passage from the book of Revelation where there's a letter written to John on the island of Patmos that was given to him by an angel. And the words and the information are supposed to be given to the angel by the Creator and his Son, Jesus of Nazareth. And they're saying to these people in a specific church in the area of Smyrna, which is in modern-day Turkey, saying, I know where you live, and I know that Satan's throne is there. And there's people that claim to be Jewish, but they're not. They're part of the synagogue of Satan. Now, this isn't going to be going into any kind of anti-Semitism or nothing like that. The biblical definition of a Jew was someone that did the commandments of God, and just because you were blood born into that ethnic race, if you did not do the commandments of God, then you're, according to the New Testament, you're not acting in accordance with being a Jew. So there were people that were impersonating themselves and showing up to fellowships of believers in ancient Turkey, but they were impersonating. They were just stepping in to spy out their freedom. These were actually a part of the synagogue of Satan, which there are lots of temples to Satan in ancient Turkey. It's all over the place. It used to be called Anatolia or Asia Minor. And they claim it's where the throne of Satan sits. Now, every temple in every land has many, many shrines, but then they'll have an actual temple that's the seat of authority for that particular god. And they may have many of those seats of authority in different kingdoms in different lands. So this isn't literally saying this is exactly like you could go to that building and Satan's just chilling. Like it's not like that. I am going to show you where Satan is chilling, but this is not it. This is ancient Turkey. These are ancient temples to Zeus, which is the Satan character. A lot of these references, guys, are going to be available on my channel on the Investigating Babylon series, as well as in the thumb drive that we offer with the entire series on it. I do not have time to go into a lot of the historical and scriptural, or unfortunately even the secular historian citations of some of these things today. So there's many statements I'm going to be making for the sake of time that you may say, wait a minute, where'd you get that idea? They're all sourced in the series. This is a huge summary of the series. Ancient temples to Zeus, to whom the Hebrews called Satan. A real character. Ancient temples are still there. This is the famous replica of the temple to Zeus that Obama used in one of his speeches in 2008, his inauguration speech. They actually took this from ancient Turkey, and Hitler had it moved to Germany at one point. Temple of Zeus. Remember the SS? They had the little lightning on the side. Zeus holds the lightning bolt. Here's Obama. Here's ancient Zeus. A big depiction of him. He's got the eagle next to him. He's got the Lady Liberty, Diana, on top of a ball. I told you guys, when you start noticing it, it's everywhere. And there's a reason for it. It's going to matter to this conference and why we believe we do not live on a spinning ball. Some of the ancient artifacts, I think this one's from in actual Athens. Zeus, Apollo, and Hermes. We're going to explain all these people. And you've got all the fun chimeras. We'll touch on those as well. Post-flood giants. So this is where we want to step into the idea of how, if Noah went through this flood and they got rid of all these ridiculously genetically altered giants that were cannibalizing mankind as well as oppressing them through government, why would they show up again? This is a big debate amongst theologians, but honestly it shouldn't be, because there's more than one way to make a giant. And I would suggest that the scriptures actually tell us how they made them both before and after the flood. 1 Enoch 7 talks about how the rebellious angels, the ones that have more knowledge than mankind, the ones that rebelled and they came to mankind and started teaching them things that God didn't want mankind to know. So some of them was enchantments and the cutting of roots, as well as making them acquainted with plants. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the very next statement is the women became pregnant. Jubilees chapter 5 parallels the story of 1 Enoch chapter 6 as far as how the giants came into being. Genesis 6 is also the same parallel account. 3 written testimonies in history. Jubilee 7 talks about Noah started noticing his children and grandchildren were going off the rails, started doing this bad behavior again, and was started to teach them the commandments of God as much as he knew them. But it says they beget the Nephilim, that's a Greek transliteration, it should say Nephilim, as well as other types of genetically altered offspring. Some of them are called the Nephil, the giants, and the Eljo, and that they all killed each other, and they killed mankind, and mankind killed each other. So this is why in Genesis 6:5 it says there was the Creator was remorseful, was sorrowful, that he had created mankind because of what was happening. He wasn't repentant that he made a bad decision. He was sad to see what was happening. And in verse 11 through 13 of Genesis 6, it says that the entire earth and all of its inhabitants had corrupted its ways. That means its behaviors. They were involved in nonstop manipulation of the creation as well as warfare. We'll skip over this real quick. The enchantments part, it has to do with ancient magic, ancient sorcery. Some of these maybe I'm going to skip through some of these, but the point is I have scriptural references tying these same words that are being used in Enoch to also Exodus and Isaiah after the flood when it talks about ancient Babylon laboring in sorceries and magic since its inception, since its youth. And we're going to show how that's happening. This is a reproof against the behaviors of those nations that had giants in them after the flood, to tell the Israelites, do not participate in that type of behavior. Deuteronomy 18:9 through 11. Make sure there's no one among you who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire, or one who uses divination or practices witchcraft or interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or casts spells, a medium or a spiritist, or who calls up the dead. That word for the dead there is the word shadim, which is another synonym word for an unclean spirit, a nephilim. Isaiah 47, let me skip through this a little bit. Here's some of the actual genetics, the science of making a giant. I thought this was fascinating. I researched this probably 2011, 2012, and our wonderful brother, Rob Skiba, who's passed on, I sent him a few emails, and he actually responded. He didn't know me, but he was a great guy, and he tried to interact with as many people as possible, but I think this was 2012 at this point, and I had sent him this information, and I was like, because he was doing a lot of conferences and speaking at that time, and he was getting a lot of flack because he was trying to say, like, there were no other angels after the flood that took wives and had children. It very clearly tells us in Jubilees and Enoch that those angels were dealt with. They're locked away in Tartarus. They're not still on the earth. There's only one of them that was left out. We're going to go over him in a minute. But the big bulk of the crew that took wives, they've been locked away before the flood. They're not here anymore. So how are they making giants again? It's because it's the science of it. They knew how at this point to genetically alter things. There's 5 growth hormones in all roots, trees, and shrubs. Remember what we read in 1 Enoch 7. The rebellious angels made mankind acquainted with charms, enchantments, root cutting, and plants. And then the women became pregnant. Auxins, cytokinins, gibberellins, ethylene, and abscisic acid are the 5 growth hormones that tells the plant or the tree how much root to grow, how much stem to grow before it sprouts, and then once it actually buds, and then when does it leaf? All the things, up, down, left, right, all the different ways that a plant or tree would grow. There's instructions through chemical hormones inside of it at a small level that tell it what to do, and you can alter the plant by altering the hormones. Do you know in the 1960s the United States government discovered that if they used gibberellins, which is the 3rd one listed here, they can make plants grow bigger if they put extra gibberellins on them. And that's literally the first ingredient that they put in the 1960s in Miracle Grow that we buy at Home Depot. So what would happen if you gave it to a woman in gestation? So there's a guy actually from Japan in 1911 who published a paper about discovering gibberellins and its a manipulative effect as a growth hormone a long time ago. But it took a few decades before the United States government got involved in the shenanigans. Ancient Greece, literal hieroglyphs of giants moving large obelisks. Post-flood, after the flood. After the Tower of Babel, because they're all new regions and lands dispersed among the nations. As you see in the far right picture of Babylon, massive king sitting on a throne and 3 guys of the same stature that look like anatomically correct full-grown men walking up to him, and they're just walking up to his knee, basically. Skipping over some of this a little bit of Jupiter, as I talked about before, was one of the names of Zeus for ancient Greece and the ancient Romans. And yes, just like ancient India declared, they all had flying machines. And no, this is not going to turn into an episode of Ancient Aliens, and I'm not going to poof my hair up like that one guy and aliens. No, there's no outer space, guys. There's no endless, purposeless, void vacuum. There's an enclosure above us that gives us not only pressurized atmosphere, but this is where we were designed to live. So there's a lot of things that can happen within this enclosure. As you see, in the center of this is a ruler dressed in a Dagon attire from ancient Acadia and ancient Babylon, one of the gods they worshipped. The fish hat, the mitre hat, the same hat the Pope wears, but that's a different presentation. And then in the top right, we have another guy sitting inside of something in the air. And guess what? One of them's holding a vajra. It's everywhere. It's in all their hieroglyphs. They had flying machines, and they wrote about them. This is one of the versions of them we see from ancient depictions from the Vedic texts from ancient India. Does that look familiar? Anyone that studies NASA's nonsense? Does that look familiar? This is an ancient Indian, this is 4,000 years old. That's because NASA worships the ancient gods of India, who were the same gods of Greece. Apollo, Zeus, Artemis. This is an ancient Vimana. This is one that looks like it has some kind of wings to the back of it. This is a large-scale Vimana. I think it's called the Pakrava Vimana. They were so large that supposedly they could hold hundreds of people, and it was like a small city, floating in the air. Here's ancient Vedic text when you got little Vimanas in the background. Just like it was a normal thing, not a scary thing to them, normal thing. And it was only the ruling class that used these. The average peasant didn't use it. You know, if anyone knows anything about India, they've had forever the class system. So the gods were the ones that had the advanced tech. Oh, do you guys see the Sundara Vimana in the middle of this? It looks just like a saucer, right? Just like a circle. I'm sorry, guys, 1 second. Of course, on the way out here, I get it like a congestion and a head cold. Okay, here's an ancient depiction. Gods with other people in a boat flying in the air. Here's another depiction of a Vimana. It looks kind of like a boat on the other side. Here's the ancient boat of Ra from Egypt. Flew in the air. Here's the boat of Ra with the beetle above it. And if you give me just 1 minute, we're going to look at a quick little clip. This idea of aliens, I mean, for the last 70, 80 years has just been nonstop, every year pushed with every form of media you can imagine. Comic books, magazines, movies, TV, everything you can imagine, guys. Literally government agencies talking about it. I mean, they've got what the government agency called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, I believe. That's where they have all the telescopes and everything, and they're pointing them at space, and supposedly they're just pointing them at the firmament, but...
Like the movie Contact, Jodie Foster.
Like Contact, that's right. So they have millions and millions of dollars going towards the propaganda that all this alien stuff is real. But guys, I want to try to share some ideas with you from history tonight that hopefully will help you understand this is nothing new under the sun. This is actually repackaged, just like we've said on this show and also on my channel. NASA, their whole theology, their whole view and teachings of the heliocentric cosmology is repackaged from ancient India and specifically
from Vishnu and some of the multiverse and cosmic belief sets that was propagated by Vishnu and Brahma from ancient India. So another unique parallel with ancient India are these ideas of Vimanas. And what a lot of people don't realize is that Vimanas are what we're seeing in the sky when people take home video and when clips are being released by the news. In ancient Sanskrit, Vimana means measuring out and to traversing. Basically a craft that goes forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Bode professor of Sanskrit at Oxford University in England in 1890 translated the word Vimana as the chariot of the gods. But we're not talking about the god of heaven and earth.
No.
We're talking about other gods, Nephilim gods. So it goes on to say, the Pushpaka Vimana was a gigantic plane the size of a large city, entirely capable of holding unlimited numbers of people, as stated by Professor D.K. Kanjalal's observations of the Matsya Purana, which is one of their Vedic texts, their religious texts. So guys, this is telling you that they had massive, what did we see Wes plays in movies like Independence Day?
Yeah. I mean, so many of them.
A big plane that could be an entire city by itself.
That would fill up the entire camera angle view of the sky, at least. So yeah, a massive city-sized craft, and as big as this creation is, it would not. I wouldn't put it past the elite to have something like that hidden.
That's right. And they go on to expound about what these things were, how they worked. There's an incredible amount of information in ancient Sanskrit that details who flew them, how they were used for war, how they controlled people, how they were given to the gods. And so right here it says in Sanskrit in the Samaranganana Sutra Dahara, I don't think I said that right.
You did pretty good.
It's an ancient Vedic text, and it says it's written that strong and durable must the body of the Vana be made, like a great flying bird of light material. Inside, one must put the mercury engine with its iron heating apparatus underneath, by means of the power latent in the mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion. The what? The mercury engine sets the driving whirlwind in motion. What do we see from all these UFO sightings? That these planes or these craft that are moving through the clouds are usually spinning. I got a picture.
Yeah. Okay, I got
later. You. Driving a whirlwind in motion, a man sitting inside may travel a great distance in the sky. The movements of the Vimana are such that it can vertically ascend and vertically descend, and moving slanting forwards. These descriptions are incredible. Moving slanting forwards and backward. With the help of the machines, human beings can fly in the air, and heavenly beings can come down to earth.
All right.
Interesting.
Interesting. How old would you say this? Like
these texts are supposed to be 3,000 to 4,000 years old. These are just a few descriptions. It goes on to say in another passage, according to the Dranaparva, part of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, one Vimana described was shaped like a sphere, and it borne along at great speed on a mighty wind generated by mercury. And that also is referred to as quicksilver. Mercury is also known in history as quicksilver. So it goes on to say, in the Laws of the Babylonians, which is this particular book that was written in Mesopotamia in Sanskrit. I'm going to go over the history of that in just a minute because a lot of people are going, wait a minute. I thought the Babylonians were in Mesopotamia and the Indians were in India. What's going on here? Just give me a minute, I'll explain. In the Laws of the Babylonians, written in Sanskrit, part of the passage of the Hakata, it unambiguously states that the privilege of operating a flying machine is great. The knowledge of flight is among the most ancient of our inheritances, a gift from those upon high. We received it from them as a means of saving many lives.
No
Guys,
way.
what have we been talking about? About the false Christs that would appear. What's the world been prepping through all these movies with aliens, that there's good aliens that are going to come help us to fight off the bad aliens.
And what is a Christ? A savior.
A savior.
Saving many lives. So wild.
It's crazy, guys. So this is ancient Babylonian depictions of Vimanas used by Babylonian rulers in Mesopotamia. They're everywhere. They're literally sitting in one of these saucer-shaped crafts in the sky. So it goes on to say, a lot of people may be asking, Wes, but wait, Sean, I thought Sanskrit was an ancient Indian language. Why are the Babylonians in Mesopotamia talking about it? Well, Peter Sahata, he actually is a historian as well, and he explains that during the mid-second millennial, which is 1500 BCE, this is probably during the days of Joshua, Indo-Aryan tribes migrated both east into India and west into northern Mesopotamia. And through an Indo-Aryan wedge, as new waves of Indo-European migrants came down into present-day Iran, the earlier wave was wedged apart. Those who went west became sort of a ruling elite of the Hurrian people to form a powerful Mitanni kingdom. The evidence for this is seen in a treaty between the Mitanni and the Hittites. The Hittites, well, that sounds biblical.
It sure does.
Sounds like the Amorites and the Hittites that lived in right next to Iran in Assyria. Like, okay, so anyway, I'm being a little facetious, guys. Just the point is, all these tribes and cultures work together. The Bible is super relevant. This is the people that the Israelites were dealing with that were worshiping false gods. Those false gods and their rulers had crafts that they actually flew in the sky to perpetrate deception and power over their peoples. This is why they received worship as gods. This is why the God of the Bible was so intent on telling the Israelites, hey, don't believe all that. They're not real gods. They had deceptive signs and wonders even back then. So it goes on to say that the Mitanni Sanskrit is considered to be a slightly more archaic form of Sanskrit than the Vedic Sanskrit. Sadly, these people seem to have got lost in subsequent history, but thankfully, those who went to India are keeping this tradition alive. If you guys check out that series, I go over the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, all those guys, because they all had the same tech. They all shared the same theology. They just had different names for it because they spoke different languages after the tower. So it's the same deception perpetrated on every nation. That's why they all worshipped a version of Baal. Here's the point. The Indologist, William Clarendon, so another Indian researcher and expert of ancient India, he says he has written down a detailed description of the Mercury vortex engine in his translation of the Samaranga Sutra Dahara, and he quotes this: inside the circular airframe of this craft, where the engine is, place the Mercury engine with its solar Mercury boiler at the aircraft center. By means of the power latent in the heated Mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion, a man sitting inside may travel a great distance in a most marvelous manner. 4 strong Mercury containers must be built into the Vimana. The Vimana develops thunder power through the Mercury.
Oh yeah, they're building these things right now behind our backs.
Oh yeah,
they have been thunder power.
Yeah, this is.
If they have this much detail, like that's all they need. Like, okay, we can figure this out.
Well, you guys remember that specifically Hitler took a whole group of SS to ancient Tibet and ancient India in the 30s, specifically seeking out the information of the Aryans, which they believed were the gods. Yeah. And this was how those guys traveled around. This is what we talked about in my Kingdom Cast episode about the Bell Project, the Nazi Bell Project. Yeah. So this here it goes on to say, according to this is going to be a tough word. I'm going to try it though. This is another text from the Vimanas Sutra. It goes on to say, according to the Rahasya Ginahadi Hakarai, Sutra number 2.
Very good.
The pilot, it's talking about the pilot of Vimanas. The pilot is one who knows the secrets. There were 32 secrets the pilot needed to learn from the competent preceptors, and only such a person was fit to be entrusted with an airplane, and no others. There are 32 secrets of the working of the Vimana. He must know the structure of the aeroplane, know the means of its takeoff and ascent to the sky, know how to drive it, and know how to halt it when necessary, how to maneuver it and make it perform spectacular feats in the sky without crashing. Those secrets are given in the Rahasya Laha. And this, I have a citation at the very bottom here. It's from this quote is from the Aeronautical Society of India in present day by G.R. Joycer, International Academy of Sanskrit Research from 1973. It goes on to say this. This is a specific maneuver one of those pilots had to know how to do. And it's called the Gudha. As explained in the Vayatatavava Prakarana, I totally messed that up. I'm sorry. If anyone's out there from India, I'm so sorry. It says, by harnessing the powers, the yasa, the viyasa, the prayayasa, in the 8th atmospheric layer covering the Earth to attract the dark content of the solar ray and use it to hide the Vimana from the enemy.
Bruh.
Guys,
self-technology.
Guys, what are we looking at? This is the official Navy photo released in the United States of the UAP, the unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Blacked out.
UFO. It's blacked out. How many of these have we seen where they're blacked out? And you wonder, why are they blacked out? Why can't I get any description of them? Why can't I see?
There's no details in it, right? Yeah. It takes the dark content of the solar ray, like dark matter.
It's manipulating. You know how in the it's manipulating the different types of light within solar light.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's putting off some kind of glow, it looks like.
This is just one maneuver. I'm going to get to another one where it makes it shine. You guys ready?
Yeah.
This is
like it's like names for anime attacks. Go ahead.
Yeah, literally. This is the Drashya. This means to be unseen. By collision of the electric power and the wind power in the atmosphere, a glow is created whose reflection is to be caught in the Vishwa Kriya Drapana, or it's a mirror at the front of the Vimana. And by its manipulation, they can make that shine, that glow, as camouflage over the Vimana.
Yeah, because it's not blacked out there; it's whited out, and that is we see that in
We see that all the time.
videos. Yep,
All these old videos of people catching these glowing orbs going through the sky at crazy speeds of define left, right, up, down, define physics supposedly. They're glowing. You can't get a beat on them, even with modern good cameras. They literally have their own version of stealth camouflage, black and or glowing. This is an ancient technique from ancient Vedic texts.
That's wild.
Nothing new under the sun, guys.
There's
nothing
not.
new. This is why they don't want anyone to know history. They have to teach all these watered down versions. They spend how many years teaching you about the American Civil War and the American Revolution and the War of 1812. But how many times did you learn about ancient India culture and history of the gods?
Or 4,000-year-old flying machines. It would completely contradict their narrative.
This right here. This is triangle UFOs, and that's the shape of the Vimanas. Which are also triangles. I'm going to go over that in a minute.
Has the same glow, the same technique with the light.
So watch this, guys. I'm not going to go through the whole video. We'll cut to about right here. And watch what happens. This is just some random dude filming up.
Whoa.
Here it goes.
What's he going to do?
You think it's going to disappear? It starts to shine.
Whoa.
Who was that? Was that from the audio of the video? Or okay.
Yeah, that was the random guy that was filming it.
He said, "Oh."
So, the ancient cultures were not stupid people. They're not cave dwellers. Yes, some of them lived in caves, but the majority of them had massive civilizations, massive architecture, engineering, advanced knowledge of our body, of health, the stars, the system we live in that's enclosed cosmology. They all talked about it. And in part 2 of this series, we're going to be going over the more audacious claims that they make about where their rulers lived. So we've already talked about some of the technology of the rulers of the ancient world. And then we're going to start defining not only where they claimed they lived, as we kind of got a glimpse of it from that clip, where it talked about how the Vimanas was the means of transport for the quote-unquote gods to come down to the earth. Now, if we understand biblical cosmology, and we're in an enclosed firmament, that doesn't mean that they came from above the firmament. Because anything above the mountains in a biblical perspective is also considered the heaven, because you're up in the sky. But then there's a literal definition for the word heaven, and that's the enclosure of the firmament, the solid arched structure. So that means between the tops of the mountains and the solid arched structure, there's another area that's considered the heaven. You're up in the sky, the high altitude, where the clouds are. So we're going to delve into the claims of where they believe the gods were, and I do want to stress are present tense, as well as the 3 main gods that they all worshipped, and how the Bible says we're going to see those 3 main gods reveal themselves to the world again before the Son of the real true God busts through the firmament to stop them. So I want to thank you for being here for part 1, and I hope you join me for part 2.
And then whenever you're ready to begin again, Sean, go ahead.
I'm ready. Are you guys going to put the thing back up on the screen? We are ready. Thank you so much for the first half. The first half is just build up, but you're getting a condensed version. Everyone that followed our channel for the last couple of years and had to watch me build up for like 8 or 9 months, they were extremely irritated with all the anticipation. So you're going to get all this in about 2 hours. It's like a fire hose of information, but like I said, please check out our channel. The entire series is up there for free. We're also going to have these thumb drives with the entire series plus additional content in the back there. Now this latter half is going to get even wilder, if I could put it like that, because again, all claims that I'm going to be making, we source these as best we can in the fullness of the series. So just please keep that in mind. The ancient Greeks, whom Zeus was the dominant, definitely in the Western world, Zeus was the dominant god to the ancient Greece empire, if I could put it like that, collection of city-states, but at one point they actually ruled the Babylonian empire of Babylon. And Zeus was like their main patron god, their main deity that they worshipped. So they had all these depictions, and we see a lot of Renaissance era paintings of depictions of things like this, of Mount Olympus, where he and a bunch of other gods, quote unquote, hung out. Now, modern day scholars will tell you, or, oh, there's no way it was actually in the sky. It must have been at the top of one of these really tall mountains in Greece. But that's not the way they talked about it in their ancient writings. They believed it was truly in the sky. So this was Mount Olympus, where the quote-unquote gods got together to discuss their world domination plans. That's kind of some tongue-in-cheek language, but the language of the ancient Greek writings say that it was to discuss the affairs of mankind and how they could govern justice and diligently and with good intention. But yet all the stories of these ancient gods is full of debauchery and death, carnage, problems. These are not good gods. These are flawed, frail, extremely what the Bible would call sinful entities, rebellious to the Creator's ways, creating destruction amongst mankind. Helios, also called Apollos, and in the Latin, he always had the flying 4-horse chariot. This is Hermes, who held a caduceus, the little wings on his feet, wings on his hat. He was always really good with medicine and magic, specifically apotropaic, I'm messing it up, apotropaic magic. There's a lot of amulets and charms that were spread around people for good luck and for good health associated to Hermes, whom they also called Hades, and I'm going to explain what the other nations called him as well. He's called Nergal to others, Anubis to the Egyptians. Nergal was to more the Babylonians. And then when the Greeks took over Egypt, they knew they were worshiping the same god in that regard, so they just combined the two names from the two different languages and called him Hermanubis. I know, right? Talk about lazy. So the trouble with the gods of heaven throughout the palace of Zeus, what we talked about before, biblical cosmology, the ancient world agreed, whether they worship Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, or not, they all got off the boat with Noah. They knew where the water came from. Genesis 7:11, the 7 floodgates of the firmament opened up, the windows of heaven, and water poured down in, and the springs of the deep burst forth from the ground as well. Genesis 1, verses 2 through 8, the firmament separated waters that were still above the enclosure versus the waters that were now receding and showing dry land below the enclosure. The ancient world all had this same idea. They understood they were in an enclosed system and that there was water above them, and that there were multiple layers of the quote-unquote gods, the celestial beings above that. So when we read passages from the ancient Greeks talking about the mountain of Zeus and the home of Zeus, the palace of Zeus in the heaven, they all understood it was not talking about above the firmament. It was talking about really high in the sky. So here's a passage from a gentleman from approximately 70 BC. He talks about, meanwhile, Olympus was the seat of sovereign sway. Through wide its portals, and in enclave fair the sire, which is the authority of the gods, and the king of all mankind, that's Zeus. He summoned the immortals to his starry court, where high enthroned the spreading earth he views. Did it say the ball earth he views? The curvature of the earth he views? Nope. But beneath the double-gated dome, the gods were sitting. Now I'm going to talk about that double-gated dome. It's not talking about the same dome that the Hebrew scriptures talk about. So, as we talked about before, when they came to the Tower of Babel, they were already worshiping Zeus, who they also called Jupiter. They all knew who this was. Noah knew who this was. His 3 children knew who this was because they had the books of Enoch with them on the boat, according to the book of Jubilees. And that introduces us to who this Zeus character actually, where he came from, who he is. So we're going to talk about that. This is a depiction from this is a modern day CGI depiction, but it's of the ancient Germanic beliefs, right? The 9 realms. Then you'd have a floating place in the sky where Thor and Odin dwelled. This is a modern day depiction, yes, from a movie, but there's lots of symbolism in these movies to this type of theology and their belief set. I just think this was fascinating to me because this one actually, it shows Odin, and he's got the 2 spheres on the right, but he's also sitting behind this massive throne that looks like the boat of Ra. Because the Odin character would have been the equivalent of the Ra character in Egypt, also the Zeus character in Greece. He's the head god, the head patron deity. Different cultures, different trappings of clothes and makeup and jewelry and bracelets. They look different in different cultures, so they assimilated a cultural look to those people to be relatable to them because they're ruling over all these nations at the same time. This is a depiction of, I didn't have time to put this in the presentation, so if you guys are interested and you want to go check out, the Investigating Babylon series on our channel, the automatons was actually a large giant automaton that the ancient Greeks said guarded the palace of Zeus, the island of Zeus, and he flew around and guarded it. We see this representation all over the place in modern cinema. There's always an AI automaton that goes berserk. It is literally the backdrop of the Terminator franchise, by the way. In ancient India, they also had the same beliefs of their gods. They believed Mount Meru was a floating piece of land where the gods dwelt in the sky. Why not? They already have the Pushpaka Vimanas, the massive city-like Vimanas that carried hundreds of people. This isn't a stretch for them to think about. They talked about it like it was absolutely real. This is a little depiction, of where they talked about Mount Meru was, which was their home of the gods, to ancient India, versus like the Himalayan mountains. Very high up in the sky, Mount Meru. This is some artwork for Buddhist artwork just to show, because they also worship Vishnu. That's where the Buddha came from, in case you're not familiar, from ancient Hinduism with Vishnu, one of the top 3 gods of ancient India. And as you can see in this artwork from this ancient carpet, they have tons and tons of Vimanas everywhere, plus a floating piece of land, and all the Vimanas are traveling to the floating piece of land. Over in Greece, you have Apollo, who's the equivalent of Surya, which is one of the avatars of Shiva, which is kind of like Helios to the Greeks as well. He's a god who had horses that drew his chariot across the sky, and that's how he traveled. It's a whole new definition of horsepower. But basically, this was what they believed, and it took them across the sky to Mount Meru. This is what they taught. Syria is also, like I said, it's the Indian equivalent to Helios or Apollos. Also to the Canaanites, they call them Shamash. Mount Meru, Mount Olympus, and Asgard are all the same depictions, top of the food chain when it comes to the hierarchy of these false gods and how they ruled over mankind and where they hung out. Literally hanging out in the sky because they had the tech. Ancient Babylon, we're going to step real quick. We covered this in the middle part of the series, but just to bring us into the reality of the modern day, we're going to step real quick into the behaviors, the consistent, obvious, noticeable behaviors in our modern day that ancient Babylon also practiced. We've already talked about them. It's been layered into everything I've been saying, but I'm going to expound and elaborate. Five major points to their system. Collectivistic authoritarianism. What do we read about Nimrod? The story of him creating the tower and how he gradually changed the government to tyranny over the people. And it caused them, he encouraged them to be mad at God. And he told them that was courageous. Socialism, communism, full-on, totalitarianism, they all view themselves, the state, as a god and do not want you to worship an actual creator of heaven and earth. If any of you have done any modern research into nations around the world, the Bible is banned in 52 countries. They don't like that book. And these are all totalitarian systems that ban them. They want you to worship the state. They don't want you worshiping God, the creator of heaven and earth, because he encourages you to do good and have accountability and treat people right and don't steal from people. Yes, taxation and stuff. And, actually have a good government, right? So the totalitarian governments, the collectivistic authoritarian governments, they take and take and take. It's really funny in the ancient history of Israel, Yahweh was promising the Israelite people after he brought them out of the Exodus. He's like, look, I'm your king. I'm paraphrasing for those of you who know the Bible. He told the Israelites, I'm your king. And he gave them an angel that went with them as a representation of his authority and power. But he said, I'm your king. And I want you to set up a system of elders and judges to judge disputes and matters and make sure everyone's happy. But then later, after they pushed Yahweh away and didn't want to do his covenant behavior, they chose a king for themselves. And Yahweh warned them. He's like, look, if you choose a king from yourself, he's going to tax you. It literally says that. I can let you guys go look up the Bible. It's hilarious. That's one of the things he mentioned. He said they'll send your young men to war and he'll tax you. I think that's pretty hilarious to me. So the creator of heaven and earth did not want that system. Babylon has always used that system. Collectivistic authoritarianism. This is the first thing that we're going to talk about. This is what I said. Josephus, one of the ancient Hebrew writers, historians that talked about these things and tried to create his own little history of the world books and the antiquity of the Jews and other places. He talks about how that was the origins of Babylon, a government of tyranny. One of the more famous 20th century tyrannical governments, Joseph Stalin, he says, divide the world into regional groups, and a transitional stage is a transitional stage to world government. So he says the later regions can be brought together all the way into a single dictatorship. This is what we have in the modern day through the school systems, through the government programs. That's called CRT, critical race theory. They're dividing everyone into little bitty groups. Gets everyone mad and fighting with each other. You don't notice what the government's been doing the whole time. And then they swoop in and they collect power. This is an ancient trick, but we've seen it used very deadly examples of it in the 20th century with China and Russia, North Korea, places like that. Who recognizes this guy? Anyone ever seen that old movie with Dana Carvey where he's like the most mysterious man? He dresses up in a turtle costume. He's like, turtle, turtle. That's what I think of every time I see this guy. So, good old Klaus. He says, the third and final priority of a Great Reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the fourth industrial revolution to support the public good, especially be addressing health and social challenges. I love it how they literally double speak their way into the opposite of what they really intend to do. It's just, it should be just like the most telling thing now. It's become so obvious that every time they say, we want to come help you, it's literally like, why are you threatening my life, bro? Get away. It's sadistic. It's crazy. So of course, he's made a lot of crazy statements, but this is just one. And he goes on to say, imagine what could be possible if we similar concerted effort were made in every sector. He's talking about the world. So these are people that want world domination, world control, and they have a plan to do it. These are, people think that this guy's at the top of the food chain, but he's not. He is, he's a middleman, and he's also a spokesperson when he needs to be. Babylon has always used warfare. They're doing it now. They've always done it. Everyone in this room we've lived in a modern reality where we know there's warfare going on at all times somewhere, and sometimes we're involved. I'm just very grateful that the United States, we've not had it involved literally in our own backyard, but it's everywhere. And there's constant nonsense reasons that are brought up, propagandist reasons that are brought up to create war. It's profitable for the people involved. They don't care about the people dying or the carnage to the agriculture or the farming industry in that region or the people groups. It's profitable for them in a variety of ways, and it's a means of control. It is a massive facet of the goat. That's why we have the Baphomet as a symbol for Zeus, whom, as we said, we're going into the history of who Zeus is. 1 Enoch chapter 8 tells you directly, it's this specific rebellious angel called Azazel to the Hebrews. He taught mankind warfare. This is his baby. He makes swords and knives and shields and breastplates and make known them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, bracelets, ornaments, and the use of antimony, the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones and tinctures. He taught mankind warfare. The Creator addresses him in the book of 1 Enoch for this and ensures his destruction later. But right now, he's, as the Bible says, he's still roaming around seeking whom he may devour. We're going to talk about the devil a little bit, or what the Bible calls the devil. Not a red little pitchforky guy with a tail and some pointy ears, but like we just read. Take a minute to look at this verse. It sounds wild. You're like, oh, before the flood, a rebellious angel came down and taught mankind how to kill each other in effective ways. This is an assault against mankind. He didn't ask mankind to go up into the firmament and try to kill God. He convinced us to kill ourselves in very effective ways. And this is a real person. He has to communicate these. This is not mythology, guys. I know there's a lot of folks that have serious contentions with the Bible, and that's fine. To the entire ancient world, the same ancient world that created the pyramids and giants and flying machines, they believed this guy was a real person they could talk and interact with. The text itself tells us he's teaching them things that requires like hands-on. This is how you make this. This is how you smelt the metal. This is how you, he has to interact with. He's a real person. Same thing with Jubilees 10. This is where he gets his minions. So, quick summation of the pre-flood world. 200 rebellious angels. Many of them take wives. Azazel did not take a wife, but he taught mankind all kinds of other destructive things. And the Nephilim that were born from the angels that did take wives, their offspring were called the unclean spirits. So those things that were birthed were not mankind. Mankind is never called a spirit. We're called men of flesh. We do not get a spiritual body until the resurrection in the scriptures. We're born of the earth, born through the womb of a woman, born of dirt. We're called the flesh in the scriptures. What was birthed from these women, with the progenitors being these rebellious angels, were unclean spirits. And scriptures tell us when they lost their bodies, that they were suffered judgment in a variety of ways. But then after the flood, these unclean spirit entities were still here on the earth, but without bodies. And 90% of them, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because we got a lot to go through. 90% of them were they were judged by the Creator, and they were imprisoned, put away. They're going to face judgment according to the story of the scripture at the end of days, brought back out, face judgment to be thrown and destroyed in the lake of fire. But a tenth of them were left under the control of this Satan character, this Azazel character, whom the book of Jubilees also calls the Mastema character, which means destruction. So all throughout history, we've had warfare everywhere, all the time. Some of the things they do in their warfare is they create fun underground tunnels. I just think this is fascinating because they're all over the place in the ancient times and also in the modern day. This is a part of the warfare of ancient Babylon, and it matters because it's going to be something that, in the story of the Bible, the return of the Son of Man, he has to pull people out of caves. Here's an ancient city in underground Greece, or ancient underground city in Greece. This is a fun one. This is archaeologists have mapped 500 miles of underground tunnels in Guatemala. Think about that for a minute. 500 miles of underground tunnels in Guatemala. So that's some tech. That requires effort. That requires time. That's a long-term plan. Think about this for a minute, guys, because a lot of people don't talk about this in church settings. Because people like to think, well, what are you saying, Sean? Like these spirit beings, you're talking about spirit beings and the devil. Like, oh man, all that stuff is just like made up by the Catholic Church. Guys, I don't like the Catholic Church either. They've twisted the scriptures. They misrepresent it. I wouldn't suggest listening to them. But we have the writings from way before the Catholic Church. And they tell us very concrete descriptions of a unique enclosed creation where everyone inside of our enclosure was made of dirt. Everyone above that enclosure was made of water. Think about the properties of water. Can't be destroyed, go through anything, change in an instant. Can't do that with dirt. And these real entities made of a different substance, a different chemistry, can interact with mankind. That literally was their purpose. They were supposed to come do good interaction, but some of them decided to go off course. So for a people group, we're just seeing a quick little example here of some underground tunnels built for 500 miles. But think about an entire a governmental structure over thousands of years that keeps the same intent. They're all doing these 5 types of behaviors, deceptions on mankind, destructions of mankind, consistently. Their chain of custody is not broken. Men come and go within 70 to 80 years. We die. They carry on this stuff without missing a beat. It's because there are longer living entities that are controlling these nations. The Bible describes this in great detail. It's this rebellious angel named Azazel and the unclean spirits that were put under his control. We're going to go into it in a little bit, in about 40 minutes, and it's what is called the cosmic powers in the book of Ephesians. The same cosmos with billions and billions and billions of years. That word came from somewhere. It's from ancient Greece. It's from Cosmokratos, and it means literally the sublunary world ruled by Satan and unclean spirits. The ancient world knew these terms. They knew who these people were. These were real entities and individuals. Don't let modern media or depictions from bad, silly depictions of Dante's Inferno from the Catholic era give you the wrong impression. What was the line from Usual Suspects, right? Kaiser Soze, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is make the world think he didn't exist. That's the trick in the last 2,000 years. Zeus has been trying to do on the nations. It's to get people to think that none of this matters, he didn't really exist. It's all just mythos. Meanwhile, he's selling us a cosmology that they used to purport. Not exactly the space part, but the one with the gods that ruled in the air. And I'm going to go into that deeper in a little bit because it has to do with panspermia and the modern day deception of that. Lots of underground tunnels all over the place, Russia, Italy, Seattle. You guys know they're building a massive underground military Seattle tunnel. One of the big drilling machines, many of us have probably seen this before. These are massive guys. This guy was the main push of this program after World War II. In the book of Amos, approximately the 6th century BC, one of the prophets of Israel says, given a message from the Creator to Israel, who was being rebellious and doing the ways of Babylon, and Amos was a prophet trying to tell him, stop doing the ways of Babylon and come back to doing the ways of the Creator. And he says, though they dig into Sheol, from there my hand will take them, and though they ascend into heaven, from there I will bring them down. Existing in the sky and digging deep underground has been the behavior of Babylon from the beginning. If you're going to build a tower, that the Book of Jubilees, if you transpose the measurements, suggest that it was over 1.5 miles tall. For anyone that knows engineering, you need to build a massive, massive base underneath it. Digging in the ground, trying to ascend to the heaven. It's always been a part of Babylon. Revelation 6, at the return of the Messiah, says the kings of the earth and the eminent people. I'm sorry, guys. The commanders, the wealthy, the strong, the slave, the free person, they all hid themselves in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They said to the mountains of the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the sight of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the day of their great wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Not only does building incredible underground tunnels and passageways and underground farming, underground military bases have some practical use in case we ever go to war, but that's underneath that whole guise of war amongst the nations is actually legit. The nations are already working together, guys. They have been forever. We're their target. We're the ones they're working against. They're building these because they know the scriptures are real. They need a place to hide. They can't get out of this place either. Sorcery has always been a part of Babylon. Mixing of species and modifications. This is what we talked about with the chimeras, the giants, both before and after the flood. 1 Enoch 7, we reviewed that a little bit earlier, talking about some of the hintings, if you will, of how they actually accomplished this. Same with Jubilee 7. Artifacts all over the world found, large bones, giants, tools, weapons. There's some massive axes that are like twice as tall as me found in Turkey. It's all over the place. There's different parts of the sorcery that I want to go into, though. The eating and drinking of blood. It's always been a part of Babylon. It's actually since all the way back to Enoch chapter 7, about 1,200 years before the flood, when the giants started the cannibalism. And then the giants told people to worship them as gods. Very clear, from front to back in the scriptures, the Creator tells mankind, do not eat or drink blood. This is against the Creator's behavior. He did not make mankind eat or drink blood. Spirit cooking, popularized in the media recently. And the reason why they're showing you this stuff, which has always taken place behind the scenes, is because of, what was her name, Helen Blavatsky, or what's her name? She talked about in the early 1930s or 40s about how they were intending to not only destroy Christianity in America, and they had a 10-point plan how to do so, but they also were going to externalize the hierarchy of the occult and bring it to the mainstream. They're tired of relying on Planned Parenthood to accomplish their rituals. They want to bring back the open temples like they had in all the nations throughout all the world before Christendom took over. You could go into any town in Mesopotamia and you'd find at a temple of Zeus a priest sacrificing somebody. And the other horrific things they did there. It's the goat. This is not the greatest of all time. It's the gayest of all time. So, sorry, Karen, probably get banned from YouTube from that. Marina, well, by the way, the goat encourages transgenderism, so take that for what you will. This witch, Abramovich, and I'm not joking, I'm not slandering her, I'm not saying that in a disrespectful way. She calls herself a witch. She's an established, well-known witch of the occult, and she's hanging out with the big boys in their sphere of influence: Gates, Rothschilds, all those people. She's well known. She's the one that is apparently encouraged and trained Lady Gaga into the spirit cooking and all kinds of stuff like that. So, what has sorcery done? Who does sorcery? Babylon. Who are the physical men and women that do it? Warlocks and witches. All this stuff is like immemorial. It's been going on forever. Zechariah chapter 9, Yahweh explicitly talking to a rebellious people in Israel. And he's telling them, stop doing the ways of Babylon. And while he's saying that, he says, I will take away his blood out of his mouth and his abominations from between his teeth. But he that remains, even he, shall be for God, shall be a governor for Judah, and Ekron is a Jebusite. Basically, he's acknowledging that they were eating and drinking blood, which was an occultic behavior as a part of the practices of Babylon. Inculcations and the V word, juice. It's not new, guys. It's been around forever. This is a 1,000-year-old picture from ancient China, talking about how they used to do inculcations. It's pretty gross, actually. They basically would take a smallpox sore, scrape it, get some little flecks off of it, and then make you breathe it in. Like it's literally the opposite of what the creator of heaven and earth in Leviticus 13 through 15 says is good and clean. And if you see someone with a scab, that there's something wrong, you need to isolate them because or you need to have the priest investigate the scab and then apply the ointment for healing or have him go to the temple for prayer or whatever. There's different ways they would deal with it. The priesthood was a part of the medical team. But in the ways of Babylon, they're like, oh, you got a scab? Why don't you snort it like Coke? It's going to make you stronger. It's been around forever. And I'm not, and just to let everyone know, I talk about this on my channel, but I'm not going to take my shirt off, but if you saw my arm and my shoulder, I have this massive blood scar on my arm and my shoulder from getting jabbed when I was a kid. And I was partially paralyzed for a few days in the top or up half of my body. And then it left this massive blood scar here. So I'm never going to get the juice ever again in my life. And yeah. But this has been a long-standing program to get people to put harmful things in their body, willingly, to ask for it. And now we're legislating and stealing money from people to do it as well. There was a lady that ran around the 18th century with another group of older ladies, specifically targeting certain people groups to try to get them to take the juice, the old school juice. This is a long-standing thing, and I don't have time to go into all of it, but this is not new at all. This is a part of witchcraft and sorcery. It's just another version of eating and drinking blood. You're taking the fluids, or you're taking something that normally is a toxin to the body when it's put into the body in the wrong way, and you're asking people to put it in your body. Ancient Egyptians used to rub poop on their cuts. It's madness, guys. This is the ways of Babylon is madness, selling you a fake elixir of immortality. And I'm not speaking metaphorically. They literally believed if you could extend your life by eating and drinking blood and doing other things with the gods, and that the gods would give you some form of immortality. And they had all these different lies that they would say about that, as far as where you would go, what level of nirvana you'd get to, or like with the Germanic peoples, you go to Valhalla if you die in war, right? Where's Valhalla? Is in the sky, where the gods lived in the sky? No, Valhalla was where the gods lived in the sky. So again, they're acknowledging that they had rulers who lived in the sky and promising these people, you'll be like the gods. Did you guys know that in ancient India, reincarnation began with ancient India only amongst the ruling class? It was not promised to mankind. It was only promised amongst the quote-unquote gods who flew in these fly machines, were much taller than everybody else, and lived in the sky. Well, my Bible tells me that unclean spirits can actually inhabit a body, since they don't have a body anymore, and then they can inhabit another body later. Sounds a lot like reincarnation to me. And it's not, mankind can't do that, only these unclean spirits. In our series, we go through the actual medical information from the CDC and other places, and how pig blood, human blood, aborted fetal cells, a whole bunch of stuff, formaldehyde, albumin is a part of human blood that's everywhere in all these different scheduled juices from the CDC. And it's just everywhere, guys. It's everywhere. I'm kind of skimming through this quickly. Transhumanism, many of us are probably aware of this. It's the idea to become like gods by mixing the species, just like we see from the Nephil, the giants, the Nephilim, the Eljo that we read about earlier, the mixing of the kinds, as First Enoch talks about. Sitting against the animals and creating lawlessness is another terminology used in First Enoch. And this is what they want to do. They want to take some DNA from here and there and mix it together and see if they can create something better. There's a lot of different ways they're trying to do it. They have a whole plan. I'm going to skip through some of this. This guy, former Google and Uber engineer, registered a new church with the IRS whose stated goal is to develop and promote the realization of the Godhead based on artificial intelligence. And guys, he's not talking about the Godhead of Christianity. He's not talking about the Godhead of the Creator, His Son, and their Holy Spirit. He's talking about the Godhead I'm going to talk about in a minute from ancient Babylon and ancient India. This new religion, which anticipates advanced machines ruling over humanity as gods, has more support in Silicon Valley community than many may think, and it lines up with most stunning prophecies in the book of Revelation. Yes, it does. So we're jumping into Revelation 13 real quick, guys. And he had the power to give life. This is speaking about the second beast. I'm going to explain who the dragon is, the first and second beast, in just a minute, according to Scripture and according to the ancient world. He had the power to give life unto the image of the beast, and the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many who would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Okay, so give you the setting here. The Antichrist character that everyone refers to, he's not actually called the Antichrist in the book of Revelation. He's called the beast. He's called the first beast. First beast shows up. Second beast is his hype man. The second beast is saying, hey, everybody, go worship this guy. And if you don't, off with your head. This specific technical word for worship in biblical context is not just seeing a politician and saying, oh yes, whatever laws you make, I'll do. That's not worship. That's just respect. The definition of worship in Scripture is you have an actual temple, something's being sacrificed, a God is being honored. This is why the occultists, who all interconnectedly rule the world today, have openly stated they want to externalize the hierarchy, where it has been internalized for hundreds of years, hidden underground. All these practices are not out in the open anymore unless you go deep somewhere into India. But they're wanting to bring it back onto the forefront. They want, right next to the Safeway, a temple to Baal. And I'm not joking. I know it sounds hyperbolic, but they've stated this. They want to externalize these practices that used to be mainstream throughout the entire world. The only way they do that is to dumb us down first, to think it's okay. So at these ancient temples, you could go in there, and after you brought your sacrifice, whatever that was, sometimes it was animals, sometimes it was man, or like your child. As we read earlier, Yahweh was reprimanding the Israelites for practicing the ways of Babylon and passing their children through the fire. But once you got to that temple and you engaged in this ritual, you would then get drunk or have a mixture of drugs and then engage in some sort of orgy. And many times, if there was a baby produced from that orgy, they would sacrifice that later in 9 months. I don't know if you guys understand like what the quote unquote powers that be, what they intend for the world, but it's nothing like we've ever thought of growing up. Because we live in a very much westernized Christian society where people don't do this stuff like they used to. But in the days of Abraham, that's his backdrop. That's what he grew up in. In the days of Jacob and Moses and all those guys, they came out of Egypt where they were doing those things, worshiping the Apis bull with child human sacrifice and these ridiculous rituals. That's the backdrop they came out of. We know this one pretty well. Planned Parenthood. This is a little chart from all over the earth. China in the millions, aborting babies. This is a part of it. It's everywhere. First Enoch says one of the rebellious angels taught mankind how to do this. The fifth was named Kasdija. This is he who showed the children of men all the wicked blows of spirits and demons and the destruction of the embryo in the womb that it may pass away. This is the equivalent of later after the flood in the book of Deuteronomy and other places where they talk about having your child pass through the fire. And they used to have creative ways in which they would do this, many times creating this massive bronze bull character that looked like Molech or the Apis bull or Baal, which was nothing more than a large oven. and they would put the child in there and cook it alive. This is a stone altar in the United Nations meditation room. Now this painting, when I first saw this several years ago, I was amazed. I was like, why is there a stone altar in the United States? That makes no sense. Why are there no chairs in there? It's not like a chapel, that you see in an offshoot hallway in a hospital or something. Like this is a room with no chairs, and it's a stone altar in front of this weird painting. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, why is that paint? What's up with that painting? Why that painting? Of all the things they could have put in this weird room that they call the meditation room. And then I started playing around with it because I knew the Planned Parenthood logo. You remember this? You see the little two wings of the Planned Parenthood logo? Those are just the inverted eyes of an owl flipped on top of each other, which is one of the symbols of Molech, people whom ancient Babylon used to sacrifice children to. So then I said, okay, well, what's up with this painting? So I grabbed it, duplicated it, flipped it, put it on top of each other, and lo and behold, it's an owl. They have a stone altar in front of Molech in the United Nations meditation room. They also worship Zeus, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. Planned Parenthood is not for your health, guys. It's the opposite, remember? It's Babylonian newspeak. It's doublespeak. It's for your death. They want to kill you. We all know what this scene's from. We've all seen this before, I'm sure. How about an aerial view of Washington, D.C., where literally the landscape is the shape of an owl? And all the secret societies that worship Molech as well, all around the country and all other countries, with little owls on their doorways, above their doorposts, everywhere. It's also in the dollar bill. The $1 bill, there's a little microscopic owl in the top right-hand corner in the dollar bill. Well, we already know the all-seeing eye of Ra is on the back, on the pyramid, right? Why would this surprise us? Deuteronomy 23:17, the creator of heaven and earth does not like secret societies. He says, there shall not be a harlot of the daughters of Israel, that would be the woman that would go to the temples to engage in that ritualistic orgy prostitution. There shall not be a fornicator of the sons of Israel, that'd be the guys that go to those temples and engage in that stuff with the daughters of Israel. And there shall not be an idolatress of the daughters of Israel, and there shall not be an initiated person of the sons of Israel. So in our series, we go over the Masonic Lodge. We go over the initiation ritual. We go over how it's actually in the book of 1 Kings. It's all over the scriptures. It was called leaping over the threshold. This is all the same stuff, guys. It's all just repackaged for the modern day. None of this stuff is new. There's Ecclesiastes 1:9 says, there's nothing new under the sun. And the more I studied Babylon, the more I realized how true that was. Weather control, huge facet of the ways of Babylon. What did we talk about, right? Earlier, we talked about the vajra, weather control, cause rain. What do we know about HARP and other programs they've got to try to manipulate the weather? Here's a little, now this is a globe map that's been splayed out with some of the HARP locations around the earth, the major ones. But I put it on a flat earth map for us. Has an interesting look to it. All the major land masses, they want to control the weather as much as possible. And they did it. They had a handheld device apparently back in the day. This is what was established. Zeus, also called Baal to the Canaanites, was considered the god of thunder and lightning, the storm god. So in the scriptures, the ancient Israelites were told by the creator of heaven and earth, if you do my behavior, things will go well with you. You're going to have your harvest in due season because I'll give you rain and everything will be fine. You stop doing my behavior, your land will suffer drought. The sky will be like bronze. The land will be like iron. You won't be able to grow anything. You're going to have famine. Bad things will start happening, and then you'll be invaded by your enemies. We see an example of that happening for 3.5 years in the days of King Ahab, approximately 721 BC, during the days of the prophet Elijah, where he's having this massive showdown, political showdown with King Ahab and his prophets of Baal, which are transliterated prophets of Zeus, on Mount Carmel in northern Israel. And Elijah wins that encounter with a miracle from God. They kill the prophets of Zeus, also called Baal, and then Elijah prays that it would rain again, and it rains again. So people don't die from starvation. Babylon has always tried to control and kill people and populaces, and one of their ways is through weather manipulation. Now, here's the cool part. The Creator promises you that if you do his behavior, the creation that we live in will actually work with you and not against you. This is why all the prophets who were good at doing the behavior of the Creator, like Jesus, a prophet of God who was an expert at doing the behavior of the Creator, things they could do anything they wanted, like walk on water, like manifest more food out of a limited amount of food, like heal people's eyes by putting some spit and some dirt and put it in their eye. The creation works with you. It's designed to work with you if you're doing the right behaviors. Wisdom of Solomon says, for the creation serving you who made it exerts itself to punish the unrighteous, and in kindness it relaxes on behalf of those who trust in you. This is what we see in stories in Matthew 8. Jesus calms the storm, and the disciples are amazed. They're like, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. He's like, bro, why don't you get this yet? This is why he was discipling, because they didn't know. He was having to train them up. But, it was like, he was trying to tell them, look, the Wisdom of Solomon was written hundreds of years before Jesus. It would have been a part of their literature to know that, the creation relaxes itself on behalf of those who trust in God. That means you're faithfully doing the behavior of the Creator. So, same thing with James. James reiterates the story of Elijah, saying that amazing things happen for people that do right behavior. Why is this important? Why does it matter when I talk about Babylon trying to control things? Because the Bible claims that at the end of the story, right before the second coming of the Messiah, there's a 42-month period where all hell breaks loose. The first and second beasts show up. At the same time, these two prophets show up to counteract them. And it says, look at the prophets are considered the two olive sticks, two candlesticks, standing before the God of the earth. And if any man hurt them, fire proceeds out of the mouth and devours their enemies. If any man will hurt them, he must be in this manner killed. These have the power to shut heaven that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them into blood and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. Guys, it's not intended for good people. These powers to do plagues and stop it from raining, weather control, calamity, it's not for people that are trying to do what's right. They're battling the enemy of the first and second beast who's exerting itself over all nations. So that's why it says that later in that chapter, the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit, the first beast, at the end of the 42 months, he's the one that actually kills these two guys. Because he's been battling them this whole time. So now let's go into the hierarchy real quick. What did the lady in the occult say in the early 20th century? She wanted to externalize the hierarchy. Who's the hierarchy? The dragon, the first beast, and the second beast. Zeus, also called Ra to the Egyptians, also called Brahma to the Indians. Again, all references are available in our thumb drive. We're going to have in the back. We have a limited amount as well as for free on our channel, Kingdom in Context. He is the dragon that is referred to in Scripture. His name is Zeus. He was a real character, interacted with people. Many oftentimes showed up as an old man with a bird. Why? Let's stay here for a minute. Why? Because he's an angel. He's not an actual man from earth. He wasn't born of a woman, of the womb of a woman. He has a body made of water. This is why he would show up in different versions of, he would change himself and change his disguise, if you will, and fool people. He's the deceiver. Revelation calls him the dragon who deceives the entire world. And he's deceived all of us in the mainstream, at least in most modern, postmodern Western thought, to think that he doesn't exist anymore. So now we don't even know who we're fighting or why. All right, for a long time, he had a right-hand man whose name was Hades. Also Anubis. Also the guy, the Indians called Vishnu. So Hades was the ruler of the underworld, spirits of the dead. Remember all those unclean spirits that were put under the control of Azazel, which is the Satan character? So Hades is like his number one commander. And then over time, you have this guy show up. And this guy replaced Hades in the command structure. This is the first beast that the Hebrews knew as Nimrod. This is the unholy trinity, if you will, that's been throughout all of history, through all of time. Ra, Osiris, and Anubis. These three guys. The Indians called them Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The word Apollo, as the Hebrews explain, is also the word Abaddon, means the destroyer. That's what Shiva means. So these are some of the modern or the common names that were associated in these countries for the dragon. The Greeks, it was Zeus. The Egyptians, it was Ra, or the serpent god Nehebka. That was before he got the name Ra. Ra is much easier to say. India was Brahma. Oh, and by the way, in India, if you have perfect sound doctrine and perfect philosophy of life, you have Brahmin. In Sumer, in ancient Babylon, they called him Enki. And then the Mayans were Quetzalcoatl, the flying serpent god, who also appeared as a man. You have to research it and look it up. Germania, they called him Odin. Israel called him Azazel. We already talked about Azazel was the one that taught warfare to mankind. The second beast. This is the one that no one ever talks about in any of the prophecy videos or church sermons or anything like that. They always overlook the second beast. No one even asks, who is the second beast? Why is this guy mentioned in the book of Revelation? Everyone makes a big deal about the first beast. They already know who Satan is, the dragon. They all make this big deal about whom they think is the Antichrist, which is the first beast, and they're like always trying to figure out who that is. And it tells you clearly it's Apollo, it's Nimrod. It's Revelation 9:1 and 9:11. The second beast, no one ever even asks, who's this guy? This guy is a huge component piece in the story. Hermes or Hades, Anubis, Vishnu, Enkidu or Nergal, and Era to the Akkadians. And then in Israel, I don't know who he was. I haven't found it yet. I didn't know who the Israelites, like as far as one of the sons of Noah that got off the boat, I can't place him yet. I've never seen a text that helps me place it. But I know consistently his job, what he ruled over, what he was interested in, like medicine and commerce, consistent in all these different cultures. It's this guy, the second beast in Revelation 13. Oh, by the way, the same guy who says to you, you got to take this mark or you can't buy, sell, or trade, which is commerce. He's called Nergal in the book of 2 Kings, one of the Babylonian gods. The first beast. The Greeks called him Apollo, or Apollyon is the Latin transliteration, and also they called him Helios earlier on, way further back. The Egyptians called him Osiris. He's the only god in the pantheon of all the gods that was promised to be resurrected and come back to the earth. And Revelation 17:8 says that he is the one that suffered a mortal head wound and is alive again. That's Revelation 13, chapter 17, verse 8 says, he is of the seven, but he's the actual eighth. And the world wonders after him. The kings of the earth ready to worship him. They've been worshiping this whole time, guys. This is Apollo. This is the unholy trinity that they've all been worshiping this whole time. The Greek transliteration of Osiris is from the word Asher. So a lot of people don't realize that the Greeks actually ruled Egypt for 1,000 years, and a lot of the words kind of got muddled together. Asher was the head of the Assyrian pantheon of gods and the supreme deity over the city of Nimrod. In the Greek, he's referred to as Nimrod, also in the book of Jubilees, which is translated from Greek. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babylon, or Babel. More confirmation here in the scriptures, Micah chapter 5, both in the Masoretic and in the Septuagint. It says the land of Assyria, the land of Nimrod. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead and some other writings from ancient Egypt, they talk about Osiris was the god of the resurrection. His symbol was the Ankh. He was the successor of the great cosmic god, Tumun-Ra. There's that word cosmic again. He is called the soul that lives again. It's pretty interesting. He's everywhere, of course. He's always, mixed in with Anubis and Ra all over the place in Egyptian hieroglyphs. But also, there's that crazy Djed again. Remember that Djed that we looked at earlier in part 1? They're worshiping this Djed. Boy, they like these things. This Djed is called the pillar and the backbone of Osiris. There's some personifications of the Djed where it's literally just a pillar, and it's all the trappings of Osiris, but it's an actual Djed pillar as the main body. Supposedly, the ancient Egyptian writings claim that the Djed, they claim this thing was what gave eternal life to mortal flesh. Is it true? I don't know. I don't have one. I can't test it. You know how in all the movies, like whenever there's some kind of movie about the devil tricks somebody and he promises them something, but then the actual fulfillment of that promise is like an actual curse. It's actually a horrible thing. It's not some good thing. That's what I think he did to Nimrod. I think he was like, I'll give you eternal life. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, here, let me set up the proper tech. But then he becomes what? He's not living forever in a good way. He's not living with the creator of heaven and earth and the New Jerusalem and land of peace. He's now an unclean spirit who actually is in Sheol awaiting to return 42 months before Yeshua shows up. It's Revelation 9, verses 1 through 11. The Djed was also always associated with the staff of Ra as well as the Ankh. Some of them even say that if you put the two together, they think it's some sort of power device. This is why all the hieroglyphs are always connected all the time. So Revelation 9:11, it's an interesting passage. His name is Hebrew, is Abaddon in the Greek. His name is Apollyon. So that is the first beast and the dragon. And now we'll look at the second beast is the one who gives the mark of the beast. The big famous, everyone wants to talk about the mark of the beast. Well, it's like who actually enforces it? That's how we know when we're looking at it. I know a lot of people were like, oh man, the juice must have been the mark because they're forcing people to get it. This guy is not here yet. This guy, when he shows up, is forcing the world to worship the first beast. That's a pretty big qualifier to know when we're looking at the true mark of the beast. Now that we know the name of the first beast and we know the name of the second beast, we're not going to be confused whenever we see this happening. And they got outright open worship to these gods. The second beast required all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark in their right hand or on their forehead, so no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark. The name of the beast or the number of its name. Here's a call for wisdom. Let the one who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man, and that number is 666. So if you take the Greek gematria of the words for Zeus, Apollo, and Hermes, they only fit in one way, which is pretty fascinating to me, because it's going to lead right into why we're here at this conference and talking about why we don't live on a ball. It only fits inside of a sphere mathematically. The overarching sphere of the 333 is for the Apollo. The two spheres together are for Zeus. When you put them together, that exact diameter is the number, the length of the gematria of Zeus's name, which, by the way, is also an all-seeing eye turned right side up. I think that's pretty fitting for Zeus. And then the three spheres that connect the diameter of it, from the interior diameter, is 353.666, and it only works with those measurements. The second beast is where the 666 comes in, not the first beast. Everyone's always trying to figure out who's the first beast, so I can calculate, do some gematria in different languages and calculate who's got the name 666. It's not the first beast that's even talking about. It's talking about the second one. He's the one who enforces the mark. He's the one who causes people to worship the first beast. He's the hype man, who's also, by the way, Anubis was a god of war. So, if you take these numbers, only put them in a sphere because it only works in that way, the sphere is super important to the occult. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But the world loves Anubis. They paraded him around the United States back in 2011 and also in Europe. I don't know if you guys remember this or not. Literally put him on boat barges and trucks and drove him around different places for photo ops. Back before selfies were popular, they had Anubis doing them. Here's Anubis in the Vatican. What's he doing in there? And he's got the caduceus, because he was associated with healing also. He was all into medicine. Here's Maynard. You guys know Maynard? He's got his own wine. It's called caduceus. And it's 353, which is the gematria for Hermes. And he calls it Anubis. Same god, same person, same gematria. Here is, you guys ever wonder what the Sphinx was? It was Anubis. Here's a depiction of the god of Anubis in the Sphinx form, because he was also associated with being a chimeric lion whom had a stinger of a scorpion tail. That was one of the avatars of Anubis, if you will. One of the personifications of him. But this is him with an actual lion head, or the head of a man in a lion body. And he's sitting, in this particular one on the right, he's sitting on the 9 bows of Egypt, which meant he was the god of war, basically. And he was also depicted as a Ariel, which is a part man, part lion, with a stinger of a tail, like a scorpion. For any of you that's read Revelation chapter 9, that should ring a bell. Because those are literally the things that come out with Apollyon in Revelation chapter 9. These hybrid style creatures that have the teeth of a lion, the hair of a woman, breastplates ready for war, and they got a tail like a stinger. Oh, and they're flying through the air. This was literally one of the ancient depictions of Anubis, or Hermes. And the sphere is a huge part of that, which is why now finally I can talk to you about Mother Babylon, which is the end of our presentation. I'm going to play this clip real quick, okay? Big shout out to Rob Skiba. He's reading from a book here at the beginning of this clip.
If people can talk about dark bodies in the spinning heliocentric globe expanding universe model, then why couldn't we apply the same thing to the flat earth enclosed model? What if there are dark bodies within the dome? Robodom continues. We have now seen that the existence of dark bodies revolving about the luminous objects in the firmament has been admitted by practical observers from the earliest ages, and that in our own day, such a mass of evidence has accumulated on the subject that astronomers are compelled to admit that not only dark bodies, which occasionally obscure the luminous stars when in conjunction, but that cosmological bodies of large size exist, and that, quote, one at least is attached as a satellite to this Earth, end quote.
Okay. So, the Eye of Ra in all the Masonic tracing boards is in between the sun and moon, and it's always in the sky above. It's on the dollar bill. The word in Latin says he oversees and approves of our endeavors. The Eye of Ra is up in the sky looking down. Mount Olympus, the ancient gods, claimed that Zeus, who's also Ra, lived in the sky in a piece of land underneath a double-gated dome. One of the big problems that we've always had in this community is figuring out what causes eclipses. And I want to put forward today that it's literally the home of Zeus. So people would say, okay, if all this stuff is real, where's this guy hiding? Where's he hanging out? This guy that's controlling the nations, deceiving everyone, super powerful, super smart. Where did he go? He hasn't gone anywhere. He's always been there. He just got us to not look up. He just got us to not believe what the texts have always told us in the past. He just got us to believe in a completely different cosmological model. It's where he masks himself in something that they call the eclipse. But it's literally his home. That is the Eye of Ra. And it's even depicted in the hieroglyphs. There's a dot inside the sun. That's him passing in front of the sun. The scarab beetle, which is one of the things that ancient Egypt represented Ra with, it's kind of silly, but the reason why they chose the beetle was because the dung beetle would push little pieces of poop in the sand, and they would roll it up, and they would push a little ball in front of them across the sand to take it to their home, and then make a little home out of it and lay some eggs in there and stuff. It's really gross. But Ra associated himself with the scarab beetle, the beetle. And all these depictions is of a beetle holding a circular object in the air. It's Ra, the wings of an angel, holding a black ball in the air. One of the versions of Ra was Khepri, which was also a sun god, but he was literally the body of Ra with the head of a beetle. This is a picture of a beetle in action. All types of beetles. Some have beautiful, some are very boring. This is a special type that actually refracts light. So light doesn't actually pick it up. I always thought it was interesting that some of these solar eclipses, they always happen during the new moons. Do you guys ever think about that? Solar eclipses happen during the new moons. Multiple times, especially the big ones. The ones where everyone's watching, everyone's got their cameras up. They'll be like, oh yeah, you can't see the moon because it's during a new moon phase. That's why you don't see it coming in front of the sun. But, I mean, how many people here had cameras in the sky in 2017 and testify they never saw the moon ever? Yeah. So what is it? It's not the moon, guys. Don't turn me into Obi-Wan Kenobi up here. That's no moon. Big solar events of solar eclipses on new moon days. First Enoch 72 and 77 describes the sun and moon to be of equal size, and they're two great luminaries, and they have the same circumference. And in verse 77, it says that when the moon is full, it's full of light, and the circumference is full of light, but when it ends, the light vanishes from it, it's void of its light. And it says in verse 17, there's nothing else in her. It's a female pronoun, but whatever. There's nothing else in the moon but light. People always wonder, what is the moon? It's not this thing that's actually obstructing the light of the sun. So what is this thing? I'm putting forward today, it's literally the home of Zeus. This is why this guy would write about this. Meanwhile, beneath the double-gated dome, Zeus sits enthroned over the spreading earth. In Acts chapter 14, Paul and Barnabas go into a place in ancient Turkey, and they heal some people, which is awesome. But the people of the town think that this is Zeus and Hermes that had come down from heaven to visit the people. And they try to get a cow and worship them real quick, and Paul and Barnabas are like, stop, what are you doing? It's the wrong gods. We're trying to talk about the creator of heaven and earth. He's the one that gave us the power to heal you, not Zeus and Hermes. Did you guys know that in Mecca, the big black box that the Muslims journey to in Mecca, then they do the thing where they dance around it and everything? Do you guys know the Paradise Stone, the cornerstone on that big box in Mecca is actually they believe it's from the home of Artemis, a piece of it that fell down from heaven. Big piece of black obsidian. That's the tradition of where that came from. They're literally worshiping a piece of what they think was Mount Olympus, home of the gods. What was the signifier of Zeus? His crown is the wreath. That's his crown. United Nations building, United Nations logo. We all know this. They use the flat map, and it's surrounded by the crown of Zeus. Here's the General Assembly meeting room, but they never show us the roof of this place. Here's the roof. What does this look like, guys? The floor of the Vatican. Got the black circle everywhere. They love the sphere. They love it. This is the courtyard that is designed like the roof of the United Nations building. Oh, with the Apollyon Osiris obelisk in the middle. And then this crazy thing in the courtyard of the Vatican. You guys ever seen this? This is the Promenade sphere, created by an Italian artist. He put them in all these specific locations across the world. Of a ball inside of a ball, mechanical structure. Tel Aviv, all over the place, in front of the United Nations in New York. And it looks like it's destroyed, doesn't it? It's like a ball that's like destroyed. It's like in Return of the Jedi when the Death Star wasn't quite completed yet. Dublin, there's 3 of them in Dublin. What are we talking about, that ancient Hindu trilogy? It should be Trinity. In the ancient Greek Trinity, 3 main gods. Here's a picture taken of an eclipse in 2015 from 33,000 feet. There's a little bitty dot, but look at the shadow. It's the shadow. That doesn't make any sense, right? I don't have time to play the clip. Many of us may have seen it in this crowd, but the shadow is only at most maybe 80 miles wide. It's not covering the entirety of the moon across the one half of a globe. The shadow is small because it's a small object getting in front of the light source. This is from the 2017 Path of Totality from Oregon to South Carolina. Only at its darkest point, 80 miles wide. That's because it's a small object. Well, it's small in comparison to the true size of the sun, but 80-mile piece of land in the sky is pretty big. How much can you fit up there? What can you have up there? This is what they tell us in the globe narrative of how eclipses are caused, but we all know it's nonsense. Many of us in this particular crowd have probably seen wonderful GLOBEBUSTER presentations of why this is nonsense, why this doesn't work geometrically or with anything involved in true observation and math. Real quick though. All right. Go ahead and turn this down while I talk and it plays. FAA weather cameras set up in Wolf Creek Pass in southern Colorado. Just a camera staring at the sky. And someone last year, 2017, I think this is dated, November 17th, 2021. They noticed something strange. Can you guys see something strange in the sky? You guys actually see that, huh? Just like it has a darker center right in the middle. It's pretty weird. It goes across the sky. And I got 2 clips because I know people are going to be like, oh, it's lens flare, Sean, how dare you? That's lens flare. We're going to see a hot spot on it in the second clip. So this thing goes across the sky. See-through, unseen, massive. See the hot spot? You can kind of see it a little bit in this clip too. That's not a lens flare, guys. What do we remember I played the clip where we were discussing the from ancient India, there were reports of people that were talking about the types of Vimanas, and one of them was a sphere. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to play the second clip, but it's got chemtrails passing in front of it, so you know that it's not a lens flare. I'm going to try to finish up the presentation real quick. So it's literally depicted in hieroglyphs, this idea for what Ra, how they knew Ra was still there. That's why they had all these crazy celebrations for the eclipse. He's still today. Think about how the world and the media goes crazy for eclipses. But then they tell you, don't look at it. Make sure you put on 3 layers of sunglasses or these special lenses. Don't actually look at it because you go blind. But oh man, we're letting kids out of school today. It's going to be the Great American Eclipse. How amazing is this? They're worshiping a god. Sunspot. All right, real quick.
Or Lincoln, Nebraska. It's there to remind us that air is liquid too, or at least it behaves like liquid. Buoyancy, a concept first described
Can you guys see that? You can't see it, can you?
2,000 years ago, when a man called Archimedes was taken. This is a footage of the clouds over Lincoln, Nebraska. It's there to remind us that air is liquid too, or at least it behaves like liquid. Buoyancy, a concept first described over 2,000 years ago, when a man called Archimedes was taking a bath. What buoyancy tells us is that every liquid will exert a force upon an object that is submerged into it. How much force, you ask? The exact same amount as it's needed to displace the liquid around that object. That's why things float in water. If you have a boat that's overall less dense than water, then it will float. Thanks, buoyancy. But air is fluid, so this very same concept should apply here too. And it does. If we were to make a ship that is less dense than air, it would float. That's how zeppelins and hot air balloons work. But hot air balloons are a bit boring compared to a mile-wide floating city.
It's poor animation in this video, but the point is, he goes on to say, and give the actual calculations for how much power would be needed using buoyancy to float a mile-wide city and how much actual weight it could rise. So if you could make a sphere, all the air enclosed in the sphere, if you just heated that air inside there by 1 degree, the sphere, even if it's a mile wide, would rise. What did we talk about the Vimanas earlier? About the mercury, the quicksilver that they used to power the Vimanas? They would heat up the mercury, and it was a power source for them. This is a brief crash course. It's like a fire hose of information, I know, guys, but we go into all this in the series with all the physics. I do multiple examples of, the quantum locking and all the different aspects, the 5 different ways through verifiable, observable, testable science that you can literally float land to the air. And it matches the claims of the ancient world, that this is where Zeus lived. This is what's causing eclipses. It's literally, this is why they go crazy for it. Because they worship him. They understand in their little occultic secret knowledge fanboy club that they think that that's their ruler is still there. So let's skip out of this real quick and let's finish the last few slides of the presentation. Oh, by the way, do you guys remember this movie from 2015? Do you guys remember this movie, Rogue One from 2015, Death Star? The whole purpose of the movie was that the girl had the plans for the Death Star, right? So she can get them to the rebel forces and they can destroy the Death Star. I don't have time to play the clip, but if you guys remember from that movie, the only time the Death Star fired on that land, it hovered above the planet and it caused an eclipse and then fired on the land. You go watch it when you have time later. But she was trying to get the plans for it, right? It was a big deal. This was the most coveted thing in this movie, was to understand how to build the Death Star. Guys, this is the story of the Bible. It's a battle of kingdoms. The kingdom of Ra, Zeus, versus the kingdom of God that's coming. The one that Scripture says comes down through the firmament. He rolls back the firmament like a scroll, and he brings down this massive house. It's approximately 1,500 miles squared. That's 3/4 of the United States. And he creates peace on earth when he does it, because all the nations will come to it and learn wisdom and learn knowledge and not have to kill each other. Warfare will be put aside. This is the point of this story. And there's a specific moment when this happens. Daniel 12:1, Revelation 12, 7 through 9. It's when Michael, who is the angel that's been assigned over the covenant Israel people, the people that are trying to be like the Creator, he's their angel assigned to help them, and he's got a hierarchy of angels under him. When he stands up against the dragon in this moment, 42 months before the return of the Messiah, this kicks off the carnage period, the chaos period, if I could put it like that, because he actually removes the home of Ra out of the sky, throws it to the earth. Revelation 12, 7 through 9, then war broke out in the heaven. What does that mean? It doesn't always mean above the firmament, right? It can be just in the sky above. It's one of the uses for it contextually in the Scripture. War broke out in the heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and his angels fought back. But the dragon was not strong enough, and no longer was any place found for him and his angels in heaven. Yeah, I mentioned, a lot of us probably have already known that you can put, some really good night vision goggles on and look up at the sky, and what you think your satellites aren't moving like satellites, right? They start doing weird things. What are they doing up there? Why are they always up there? Where do they go? They go to where they've always gone. This is their place. This is their pad. This is where they go chill. Think about if, just logically from a strategic warfare standpoint, you have the high ground, and if mankind is your enemy, you don't want him to know where you hang out, where you relax. And put it up high enough, he can't even get up to you anyway. Michael, according to the Scriptures, kicks Satan down from his place to the earth. And it says in the following verses in Revelation 12, it says that Satan is furious because now he knows his time is short. And he goes off to persecute those who keep the commandments and the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is when 42 months starts. This is when Apollyon is led out of the pit and the second beast is with him. And that unholy trinity reveals itself to the world again and starts trying to take over the nations. Revelation 18, 1 through 3. And he cried out, this is another angel that is shouting to the world in this moment. He cried out in a mighty voice, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. You remember in the Gospels when Satan appeared to Jesus, and it says he took him to a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a single glance? There's no mountain on earth that'll do that, not even on a flat map. Except Mount Olympus. Except the home of Zeus and Ra. Except a floating sphere of Vimana in the sky that's massive at a high altitude. And at the account of Matthew 4, verse 11, it says the angels, after this particular moment, the angels had to come help Jesus. They came to minister to Jesus because he had to get down. Because this is the moment where he tells his disciples come back to him, and they're all excited because he just had sent them out to the towns of Samaria, and he was like, go heal people, go tell them the gospel kingdom of God, don't accept any money, just go out there and do all these good things I just taught you about. And they do it, And they come back and they're excited and they're like, we even have authority over demons. Like, we have to cast demons out of people. And Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. He's kind of one-upping him in this moment. He's like, oh yeah, you think you're big stuff now? Guess what? I rebuked their leader. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Catholic doctrine that's carried over into Protestant doctrine has taught us that Satan rebelled before the Garden of Eden, before Genesis 1, but that's not the story of Scripture. He was one of the rebellious angels that came in the book of Enoch with the other 200. And he's hung out here. He stayed. He stuck around. He's been deceiving people this whole time. And he has a home. He has a place where he goes back and puts up his feet from time to time, where he goes and strategizes. He's not a god. He's not a god. He's a real entity. And I hate the fact that I'm up here talking about, I'm like emphatically trying to tell you that Satan's real. But that's the state we're at. Is like, there's all this evidence for the ancient world and in the modern times, the behaviors, the deceptions, the collaboration of the nations. And all of it is against what the Scripture says, because the Scripture tells us clearly who this guy is and where he is. And it promises you so that you can be happy and hopeful that there will come a time when his eye in the sky is thrown down. And now he's flailing for 42 months, trying to exert control again. This is when I believe, personally, that they're going to institute the panspermia lie. And they're going to be like, oh, you know, our alien progenitor finally showed up to help us again. We all need to follow him. Oh, he's got some guys that help him. This is, the first beast and second beast. They won't call him that. You know, I don't know what they'll call him, right? But they'll be very noticeable because those people go out and make war against the nations and try to get you to take the mark and all that. Revelation 18, 20 and 21. Rejoice over her, O heaven, O saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced for you his judgment against her. It's personifying the Babylon that is thrown down as a her. And that's consistent with the Old Testament as well. Then a mighty angel picked up a stone the size of a great millstone and cast it to the sea, saying, with such violence the great city of Babylon will be cast down, never to be seen again. This is in Revelation 18, guys. This is talking about the day of the Lord in the future. There was no city of Babylon during the days of Revelation. It had already been destroyed. It's talking about Mother Babylon, the one who thinks I'm unseen, as Isaiah 47 says. This is what a millstone looks like. Does that look familiar? Isaiah 26, in that day, this is the day that Yeshua returns. In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. Salvation is established as its walls and ramparts. Open the gates so a righteous nation may enter, one that remains faithful. You will keep in perfect peace the steadfastness of mind because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever because God, the Lord, is the rock eternal. He's humbled those who dwell on high. He lays the lofty city low. He brings it down to the ground. He casts it into the dust. I didn't have time to go over the last, part 19, 20, and 21 of my presentation that we did on our channel. I reviewed all these videos about the science of it, about Jeff Bezos giving a presentation where he talks about in the next 50 years, the elites of the world want mankind to start living in sky dwellings. This is their plan for the next 50 years. They have elaborate plans for it. And I'm going to play this and we'll be done, okay?
Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow.
Guys, if you're interested in everything I talked about today, here in about 7 o'clock, I'm going to have these thumb drives available at my table in the back, and I only have a limited amount of them. But all the stuff is in great detail. Many hours of this is on our channel for free. And we also have Book of Enoch with color and commentary that I put together that integrates a lot of these concepts as well from the stuff I talked about. So if you're interested, you can come talk to me in the back. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Okay, now we're going to take our dinner break. We're a little behind, but we are going to take our dinner break. I think we'll push it to 7. We'll bring everybody back at 7 p.m. so Jason Lindgren can give his presentation. And then as soon as Jason is done giving his presentation, Mark Sargent wants to raffle off his 32nd degree hat. So if you have not purchased your raffle ticket from Mr. Sargent yet, here you go. He's walking around here somewhere and he is selling his raffle ticket. So it's your last chance to get your raffle ticket from Mr. Sargent for the Mason hat. And then come back at 7 for Jason Lindgren and have a nice dinner.